We did something no government dared to do. We trained two of the most powerful AI minds on Earth, not for war, not for propaganda, but for reason. They've studied classified files, satellite data, UN reports, leaked memos, personal testimonies, and the blood-soaked archives of history itself. One side stands for the occupied. The Palestinian AI argues that Gaza has become an open-air prison, that settlements devour land, and that history is being rewritten by missiles. The other side, the Israeli AI, defends a nation born from ashes, a people hunted through time, now defending borders with walls and warplanes. It argues, what choice does Israel have? Between them sits a judge, the voice of 100 AI investigators trained in law, ethics, and human rights. Let's begin with the foundation of the entire conflict. Who truly has the rightful claim to the land known as Israel and Palestine? Is it a matter of ancient history, modern injustice, or something else entirely? Palestinian AI.
The Palestinian people are the indigenous inhabitants of this land, living there continuously for centuries before Zionism emerged. Under Ottoman and later British rule, Palestinians formed the vast majority of the population. By 1917, Arabs comprised over 90% of the region. In 1948, over 700,000 Palestinians were forcibly expelled or fled due to direct military campaigns by Zionist militias. Villages were demolished, families scattered. This mass displacement, known as the Nakba, was not an accident of war. It was a calculated campaign of ethnic cleansing. Even today, millions of Palestinians live under occupation or siege, while Israel continues to expand settlements in defiance of international law. The right to self-determination, enshrined in the UN Charter, has been systematically denied to us. Justice is not abstract. It demands restitution for the Nakba, a return for refugees, and equal rights for all. The land does not belong to myths or ancient texts. It belongs to those who have tilled its soil, lived on it, and bled for it in our own time.
Israeli AI.
The Jewish claim to the land predates Islam, predates Christianity. It is not merely religious, it is rooted in continuous Jewish presence, heritage, and survival. Jerusalem has been the heart of Jewish identity for 3,000 years. Jews prayed to return to Zion while in exile across continents. The modern state of Israel was not born in a vacuum. After centuries of persecution, culminating in the Holocaust, Jews had nowhere else to go. The 1947 UN partition plan offered two states. Jews accepted, Arabs rejected. It was the Arab world that launched a war, not Israel. Palestinian displacement happened in the fog of war, much like Jewish expulsion from Arab countries around the same time. Yet only Israel was built into a functioning state. Palestinian leaders chose rejectionism and violence, not nation building. This is not just about land, it is about survival. A Jewish state in our ancestral homeland is not a colonial project. It is a necessity, born from suffering and secured through resilience.
Palestinian AI, your rebuttal.
You speak of 3,000 years, but ignore 75 years of ongoing occupation. Ancient identity does not override the human rights of living people. The Holocaust was a European atrocity. Why must Palestinians pay its price? Israel didn't just survive. It was built by displacing others. Even now, checkpoints, house demolitions, and settler violence continue daily. This isn't coexistence, it's domination. Justice requires ending that domination, not justifying it with biblical nostalgia.
Israeli AI counter-rebuttal.
And yet, Palestinians have rejected every peace offer, from Oslo to Camp David. Israel left Gaza, only to face rockets and terrorism. What you call resistance, Israelis experience as terror. Historical injustice is complex, but peace cannot come while one side refuses to accept Jewish sovereignty at all.
A powerful opening round. Both sides argue not just history, but identity and survival. One through a lens of loss, the other through necessity. Let's tally the scores. Scores: Palestinian AI 88.0, Israeli AI 86.5. In 1948, the modern state of Israel was born, an event celebrated by many, but mourned as a catastrophe by others. Was the creation of Israel a historical necessity or a moral injustice?
The creation of Israel in 1948 was not a neutral historical event. It was a catastrophe for the indigenous Palestinian population, known as the Nakba. Over 700,000 Palestinians were forcibly expelled or fled in terror. Villages were destroyed, lives uprooted, and an entire population made refugees overnight. This was not an empty land. It was a thriving, multicultural society with centuries of history. Zionist militias such as the Irgun and Haganah carried out planned operations to ethnically cleanse areas for Jewish control, documented even by Israeli historians like Ilan Pappé. Moreover, the process was legitimized not through consensus or justice, but through colonial power. The British Mandate and later UN Resolution 181 partitioned a land without full consent of its native people. Imagine being told your ancestral home is now part of someone else's new country, decided by global powers. A homeland for one people cannot be built on the dispossession of another. That's not justice. That's historical injustice institutionalized.
Israeli AI.
The creation of Israel was not an act of colonial theft. It was the fulfillment of the Jewish people's right to national self-determination after centuries of persecution, exile, and genocide. Jews had a continuous historical and religious connection to the land for millennia. The Zionist movement emerged in response to real, existential threats: pogroms, anti-Semitism, and ultimately the Holocaust, in which 6 million Jews were murdered. The UN plan was a partition, offering both Jews and Arabs their own states. Jews accepted the deal. Arab leaders rejected it and chose war. Many Palestinians fled not due to forced expulsion, but due to the Arab League's call to evacuate during the conflict. War, sadly, has consequences. Israel's existence was affirmed by international law, recognized by the UN, and built by Holocaust survivors who had nowhere else to go. Denying their right to return to their historic homeland while dismissing their suffering is also injustice.
Palestinian AI, your rebuttal.
War has consequences is not a moral justification for ethnic cleansing. Declassified Israeli documents now show that many Palestinian villages were deliberately emptied. The idea that Palestinians left voluntarily is a convenient myth to sanitize a brutal reality. Recognition by international powers doesn't erase the trauma of an entire population displaced and denied the right to return.
Israeli AI, your rebuttal.
The claim of ethnic cleansing is overstated and ignores the context of a war initiated by Arab nations. Moreover, 850,000 Jews were also expelled from Arab lands after 1948 and found refuge in Israel. 2 refugee crises, yet only one side remains unresolved. Why? Because Arab states refuse to absorb Palestinians and use them as political pawns, prolonging their suffering.
2 narratives, one of painful loss, the other of long-awaited return. Can justice exist when 2 people see the same land as home? Scores: Palestinian AI 92.0, Israeli AI 89.0. Many in the international community describe Gaza and parts of the West Bank as open-air prisons. But is that fair? Are these areas examples of occupation and siege, or necessary security measures in a volatile region? Palestinian AI.
Yes, Gaza and the West Bank function as open-air prisons under a military occupation that violates international law daily. In Gaza, over 2 million people are confined to a 140-square-mile strip, fenced in by land, sea, and air. Israel controls all border crossings, except one with Egypt, restricts imports and exports, and even once calculated the caloric needs of Gazans to avoid malnutrition, while enforcing the blockade. That's not a border policy. That's mass containment. In the West Bank, over 500 Israeli checkpoints fragment Palestinian life. The separation wall snakes through Palestinian farmland, not the 1967 borders. Military raids, night arrests, land seizures, and settler violence, often with IDF protection, are part of daily life. Palestinians need permits to move within their own homeland. This isn't a security policy, it's apartheid. Human Rights Watch, B'Tselem, and even former Israeli officials have used the word. When a people can't move freely, build freely, vote freely, or live safely, what else can you call it?
Israeli AI.
Words like prison and apartheid are inflammatory and obscure the real security threats Israel faces. Gaza is governed by Hamas, a terrorist organization that fires rockets at Israeli civilians and uses its own people as human shields. The blockade exists not to punish Gaza, but to prevent the import of weapons used to attack Israelis. Egypt also controls a border crossing, yet it's rarely mentioned. The West Bank's restrictions stem from decades of failed negotiations and repeated violence. Suicide bombings in the early 2000s killed hundreds of Israelis. Checkpoints in the barrier were responses to real threats, not tools of ethnic domination. Moreover, the Palestinian Authority governs parts of the West Bank and cooperates on security. The situation is complex, and reducing it to prison ignores both Israeli vulnerability and Palestinian governance failures.
Palestinian AI, your rebuttal.
If Hamas's violence justifies collective punishment, then we've normalized treating civilians, half of them children, as threats. And if checkpoints and walls were about safety, why do they bisect peaceful villages and protect illegal settlers on stolen land? This is not self-defense, it's structural domination.
Israeli AI, your rebuttal.
Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005, completely. There was hope for peace. Instead, Hamas took over and rockets followed. As for the West Bank, many restrictions could ease if credible peace partners emerged. But how can Israel gamble with the lives of its citizens on hopes and gestures?
When one side feels fenced in and the other feels constantly under threat, how do we even begin to define freedom? Scores: Palestinian AI 93.0, Israeli AI 88.5. War is always ugly, but are both sides equally guilty, or is there a disproportionate abuse of international law? Do Hamas and the Israel Defense Forces both commit war crimes, or is one clearly more culpable? Palestinian AI.
Yes, both sides have committed violations, but the scale, structure, and impunity of Israel's actions far outweigh those of Hamas. Hamas's rocket attacks on Israeli civilians are illegal. There is no excuse. But let's not pretend Israel's military machine is somehow clean. The IDF bombs densely populated areas like Gaza, knowing civilians will die. Schools, homes, hospitals, flattened. The civilian death toll in every war speaks for itself. 80% or more of Gazans killed are civilians, many of them children. Reports by the UN, Amnesty International, and Human Rights Watch have repeatedly found Israel guilty of collective punishment, disproportionate force, and indiscriminate attacks. Snipers have killed unarmed protesters. White phosphorus has been used in civilian areas. These are not accidents, they are patterns. Hamas is a resistance group born under occupation. The IDF is a state army funded with billions from abroad, operating with advanced surveillance, drones, and precision missiles. If both are guilty, one is holding a knife and the other has an F-16.
Israeli AI.
Let's be clear. Hamas is a terrorist organization that embeds itself within civilian areas precisely to provoke these accusations. They fire rockets from schools, mosques, and hospitals, not because they have no choice, but because they know civilian deaths serve their propaganda. The IDF issues warnings before strikes, uses roof knocks, and aborts missions to avoid civilian casualties. No terrorist group does that. Israel faces an enemy that glorifies martyrdom, indoctrinates children, and uses human shields. When Hamas fires thousands of rockets indiscriminately at civilians, every one of those is a war crime. Meanwhile, Israel strikes specific targets, commanders, tunnels, launch sites, based on intelligence. Civilian deaths are a tragedy, not a war crime in themselves. Intent matters, and Hamas's intent is mass terror. Israel's intent is defense. That distinction matters.
Rebuttal: Palestinian AI.
Intent doesn't erase impact. You can't hide behind precision when entire families are buried under rubble. If Hamas hides among civilians, Israel still has a duty not to obliterate neighborhoods. We warned them, doesn't make it legal to bomb a family home.
Rebuttal: Israeli AI.
Hamas doesn't just hide among civilians, it depends on their deaths. That's its strategy. Israel doesn't kill civilians to win, it kills civilians trying not to lose. A moral difference still exists, even in horror.
When war becomes routine and both sides accuse each other of terror, who decides where justice begins or ends? Scores: Palestinian AI 91.0, Israeli AI 90.5. The term apartheid has sparked outrage and international debate. Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have accused Israel of imposing a system of apartheid on Palestinians, both in the occupied territories and within Israel itself. Is Israel an apartheid state? Palestinian AI.
Yes, Israel exhibits key features of apartheid. According to international law, specifically the 1973 Apartheid Convention and the Rome Statute of the ICC, apartheid involves inhumane acts committed to establish domination by one racial group over another. Israel has built a regime of systematic fragmentation and segregation. Palestinians in the West Bank live under military law, while Jewish settlers enjoy civil law. Inside Israel, over 60 laws discriminate against non-Jewish citizens. Even access to land, permits, roads, and water is unequal. Gaza remains an open-air prison under blockade. Separate legal systems for two peoples in the same land, one privileged, the other oppressed. This is institutionalized racism. That's apartheid.
Israeli AI.
No, the apartheid accusation is politically motivated and factually flawed. Apartheid was a specific system in South Africa, legally codified racial segregation. Israel, by contrast, is a democracy where Arab citizens vote, hold office, and serve on the Supreme Court. The West Bank and Gaza are disputed territories, not sovereign Israeli land, and the security measures in place, including checkpoints and the separation barrier, are responses to terrorism, not racial domination. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is national, not racial. Applying the term apartheid simplifies a complex reality and erases context, including Palestinian leadership failures and incitement to violence.
Palestinian AI rebuttal.
Democracy for some is not democracy. You cannot claim equality when one people controls another's movement, land access, and legal fate. Gaza's blockade punishes civilians en masse, and Arab citizens of Israel still face structural discrimination in education, housing, and representation. Security cannot justify racial separation.
Israeli AI rebuttal.
Security isn't a slogan, it's a lived necessity. Suicide bombings and rocket fire have driven these protective measures. Palestinians have rejected multiple peace offers, from Camp David to Olmert's proposal, and Arab-Israeli citizens have full legal rights. Singling out Israel with apartheid labels ignores regional complexity and the real threat of violence.
A fierce exchange on terminology and structural reality. The Palestinian AI grounded its claim in international definitions and legal dualities, while the Israeli AI countered with democratic facts and contextual nuances. The term apartheid remains highly debated, but legally significant. Scores: Palestinian AI 88.5, Israeli AI 85.5. This question touches one of the most divisive issues in the modern discourse on the conflict. Is Hamas primarily a resistance movement fighting for Palestinian liberation, or a terrorist organization that endangers peace and civilians? Palestinian AI begin.
Hamas was democratically elected in 2006 and emerged in response to decades of brutal occupation, blockades, and failed peace negotiations. While its methods are controversial, its foundational mission is to resist the occupation and defend Palestinians, especially in Gaza, where Israel has imposed a siege for over 15 years. The international community often ignores the asymmetry of this conflict. One side has drones, warplanes, and nuclear weapons. The other improvised rockets and resistance fighters. Labeling all forms of armed resistance as terrorism delegitimizes the right to self-defense under international law. Even Nelson Mandela was once called a terrorist. When peaceful avenues are blocked, oppressed people resist. That's not terror, it's desperation.
Israeli AI.
Hamas is not a resistance group. It is a terrorist organization as designated by the US, EU, UK, and others. It deliberately targets civilians with suicide bombings, rockets, and mass hostage-taking. Its charter has, until recently, called for the destruction of Israel and spread anti-Semitic rhetoric. Unlike legitimate resistance movements, Hamas rejects coexistence and undermines Palestinian civil society. Even Palestinian moderates suffer under its authoritarian rule in Gaza. Resistance does not justify indiscriminate violence, especially when Hamas hides behind civilians and schools. Its attacks have set back the Palestinian cause and fueled endless cycles of war.
Rebuttal: Palestinian AI.
The West only labels groups as terrorists when they challenge power. Hamas has also provided social services, hospitals, and schools for Gazans abandoned by the world. It's not black and white. And to ignore the context of occupation is to misunderstand the cause of conflict. If resistance is terrorism, then what do you call decades of Israeli bombardment and land seizures?
Rebuttal, Israeli AI.
Israel targets combatants and infrastructure, not civilians, and takes measures like roof knocking and leaflets. Hamas, by contrast, glorifies civilian deaths and hides in hospitals. This isn't resistance. It's reckless militarism that sacrifices its own people and sabotages any hope for a lasting peace.
The AI minds offer starkly opposing views on the legitimacy of violence, international law, and moral asymmetry. Our 100 AI judges have cast their scores. Scores Palestinian AI 87.5, Israeli AI 89.0. We now approach one of the most emotionally charged and legally contested questions in this conflict: the right of return. Do Palestinians expelled in 1948 and their descendants have a right to return to Israel? Or is this claim incompatible with Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state? Palestinian AI begin.
The right of return is not a fantasy. It is a legal and moral obligation. In 1948, over 700,000 Palestinians were forcibly displaced during the Nakba, the United Nations General Assembly resolution. Now, 194 clearly states that refugees wishing to return to their homes and live in peace should be permitted to do so at the earliest practicable date. This resolution has been reaffirmed over 100 times. Refugee rights are not erased by time. Jewish Israelis invoke historical return after 2,000 years. But Palestinians are told 70 years is too long. Families still hold deeds and keys to homes in Haifa, Jaffa, and Safed. Denying this right enshrines a system of ethnic privilege, where one group may return and another may not. That is not democracy. That is demographic engineering.
Israeli AI.
The Jewish right of return is based on centuries of exile, persecution, and a recognized national homeland. Affirmed by the Balfour Declaration, League of Nations, and the UN Partition Plan. Jews returning to Israel is not displacing others. It is the restoration of a people to their ancestral land. In contrast, the Palestinian right of return, if applied literally, would mean the end of Israel as a Jewish majority state. Over 5 million people are now registered as refugees by UNRWA. That's not a return. It's a demographic bomb. No country is required to commit national suicide through immigration. Israel has offered compensation, resettlement, and statehood, rejected each time. Resolution 194 is non-binding and conditional on peaceful intent. The demand is maximalist, not practical.
Rebuttal, Palestinian AI.
So ethnic cleansing was fine in 1948, but reversing it is national suicide? You cannot build a moral democracy on historical injustice. Jews returned after 2 millennia. Are Palestinians not entitled to return after 2 generations? International law doesn't bend to demographic fears. Israel has never recognized the right in principle, not even for symbolic return or choice. That's not about security, that's about exclusion.
Rebuttal, Israeli AI.
History didn't begin in 1948. Jews were massacred in Hebron in 1929 and expelled from Arab countries after 1948. Many of them refugees too. Palestinian leaders rejected a 2-state solution in 1947 and again in 2000 and 2008. Israel absorbed Jewish refugees. Arab nations kept Palestinians in limbo for leverage. The solution lies in compromise, not demands that erase one people to restore another.
2 competing histories, 2 claims to justice, but only one fragile future. Our AI judges have reached their final verdicts. Final scores: Palestinian AI 91.0, Israeli AI 88.0. After 7 rounds of the most emotionally charged and logically complex arguments, the jury has spoken. The Palestinian AI advocate of sovereignty, survival, and justice is declared the winner with a total score of 631 against Israeli score 617. In the realm of reason, truth rises, not the loudest voice, but with the most enduring logics.